Have you ever had that distinct moment when you said something or you did something and you suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I've become my parents? Usually that's a startling feeling because, like all kids, we grow up watching our parents doing the best they can, right? And they are fumbling through parenthood and marriage. And at some point, we're watching them do this, or watching them interact with us. And we may say to ourselves, I am not going to be like that, or I'm not going to do that thing. And we make that vow to ourselves. But then years later, instead of being different, we come to find that we are actually repeating the very same pattern. Now, some of those patterns have serious implications for our life and the consequences in our lives. They can really impact the way we connect and attach to other people. They can really impact the way we respond and cope with stress. They can expose or increase our vulnerabilities to things like addiction, abuse, adultery, divorce, narcissism. So in today's conversation, we want to talk about the patterns that get passed down from generation to generation, and to ask the question, how do we go about breaking those cycles of dysfunction and trauma with the hopes that all of us can create something new, something better, healthier for the generations that come after us? Welcome to The Work Within, where we have conversations about mental health and faith to help you live with greater connection and wholeness in your everyday life. The Work Within is a podcast of the Watershed Initiative, supporting the mental health needs of the local church. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, John Lin, and today I am joined by my friends and co-hosts Ly Tran and Dieula Previlon. Both of them are licensed therapists, supervisors, and they have helped a lot of people break those cycles of trauma, break those generational sins to create something different. So Ly and Dieula, I'm so glad to see y'all. How are y'all doing today?
I'm doing good. Yes, I'm excited to be here and be
Yeah.
a part of this conversation.
Yeah. Good to be here as well, John. Thanks for having us.
Well, before we dive into the conversation, two quick invitations. If this podcast has been helpful to you or served you, would you show us some love by leaving us a rating, a review, or subscribing? Secondly, if you're looking for a clinically trained, clinically excellent Christian therapist, we would love to help. So just reach out to us. All right, let's get into this. I thought we would start by a little bit lighter fare. And so I wanted to ask the two of y'all, is there anything you've ever caught yourself doing or saying and you're like, oh, that's just like my mom or dad?
You want to go first, Dieula?
Go first. First of all, I'm a perfect parent and I never repeat.
Lies, Dieula.
One simple example I've caught myself doing is particularly how my children dress for the weather. I can distinctly remember my mom especially giving us a hard time about going outside, in the rain or in the cold, or cover your head, or you're going to catch a cold, or, you're going to get sick if you get wet by misty rain. And I catch myself doing the very same
Yes.
thing all the time. And I think deep in my heart, I still believe that it's the truth, even though scientifically it's been debunked everywhere, but I still believe it's the truth.
I think I'll share my story is far more visceral or more behavioral. About maybe, 10 or 15 years ago, I started sneezing differently. I could just the way I sneeze just started to change, and I realized as I was sneezing more aggressively, let me just say it that way, I'm like, this sounds exactly like how my dad sneezed. And you can ask my kids, when I sneeze, it's like a whole echo. I've got to just let it all out kind of thing. I'm like, that's exactly how my dad sneezed. And it took me a moment there. I had a little bit of like, oh man, I'm becoming my dad moment. It didn't stop there. It was sneezing. It's how I walk, how I move. I just started noticing I'm turning into my dad. Physically, I am turning into my dad.
That's
So
hilarious.
Wow.
That's
Yeah, I wasn't
hilarious.
expecting that story.
yeah.
I was thinking about ways I've done this, and one way I realized is there have been some times, and I still do this. All right, just to be honest, I still do this. I'm trying to catch myself, but I'll enter a room where maybe my wife, Grace, and kids are talking, and I'll take a seat on a couch, and then I'll promptly lay my head back and close my eyes, and I'm listening. Like I want to be present for the conversation, but obviously my body language, the fact that my eyes are closed, my mouth's agape, like it doesn't communicate attentive listening. And several years before that, I remember distinctly I was talking to I think it was my mom and my wife, and we were in the living room, and my dad joined the conversation. He sits down. I'm like, oh, great, my dad's joining the conversation. He plops down and promptly puts his head back, leans back, closes his eyes, and I would just remember thinking, oh, okay, not a great way to engage in the conversation. And I realized like, wow, I'm doing that very same thing. So yeah, I'm trying to open my eyes when we have conversations. Listen more
If you
attentively to
do that in
people.
this conversation, we'll let you know, hey, Don,
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And so I think that does highlight the fact that, some of these patterns, okay, the way you sneeze, maybe asking your kids to wear more clothes, not a big deal. But then other patterns that we might want to take a second look at, get curious about, and reevaluate. And it does bring up attention for me. And I want to just share this, like, even for me, sharing that example about the way I emulate my dad and what my dad has done, like, I think it raises attention. And I've heard the therapist Adam Young on his podcast talk about that it is possible to honor your parents and also be honest about your experience with your parents. And for me, that's a hard thing because um, generally speaking, my thought is that to honor them is not to share or to tell the truth about some of the hard things that I experienced. And so I've realized that getting stuck there, that fear of dishonoring my parents can actually keep me from facing. And for actually many years, it kept me from facing things that I needed to face. So do y'all see that struggle a lot? And, how would you talk to someone who is struggling?
Yeah. I mean, I would say 90% of people that comes into counseling is dealing with that struggle. And some people who don't come to counseling is dealing with that struggle, right? Because family loyalty is a big deal thing. That's why one of the
Yeah.
things we start with in counseling is really to talk about family of origin, because we want to see where the bones are buried, because family loyalty will really, really stop you from doing your work because you believe you're going to dishonor your family if you share XY. Even in the counseling office, when the family's not there, or when
Yeah. Yeah.
everything is confidential, when we promise them confidentiality, or else we'll lose our licenses. Even for me as a human being who have gone through therapy, I've seen how I hold back in sessions because I wanna honor my mother, my father, and their name, even behind closed doors, right? So
Yeah.
it's a big deal. How I handle that with clients is really time. It takes time to build trust with clients and people, um, for them to know that we will handle their families with care, and we will handle the nuances with care, that you love them and you struggle with them. You care for them and you struggle, so you have to balance that, manage that very delicately with people because I can talk badly about my family, but you can't.
Mm,
You
mhm.
know, I can say mean things about my family, but you can't. And so when they're navigating those spaces, it needs to be done very delicately.
Yeah, I would add this is, as Jurla said, probably a good chunk of what therapy is like. A lot of time is spent in the beginning of just trying to till the ground a little bit so that we can have honest discussions. And I find that what makes it hard for a lot of people, and myself included, I went through my own therapy as well before becoming a therapist. And true to form, we worked on family of origin issues, and that this is it's a difficult thing to hold for people at the same time being honest about something and compassionate as well.
Mhm,
And when you start doing that, it feels like if you're gonna err on the side of honesty, it feels like you're gonna be critical or not very compassionate or forgiving. And those feel at tension. And that's part of the work that we have to do internally is like we have to be able to hold both at the same time.
mhm,
I think also what makes it really hard for a lot of people is that when you start considering that family of origin, parenting, styles when you were a kid, that you may be kind of like it's like a Jenga tower, like you're poking at certain things and it's already not stable, right? It already feels a little bit like, like I don't feel great about my family of origin. But if you start knocking at some of the things, like those are the few stable pieces that I have, and you take those things away, it can produce a lot of fear and anxiety. Like, well, if that if that structure is, you know, uh, uh, you know, hacked or debunked a little bit, if we start poking at that, it begins to really create a lot of anxiety. Like, well, what kind of relationship will I have left, right? And
mhm.
so a lot of the work that we do is being able to consider that we can do both at the same time. We can be honest and transparent and have hard discussions while at the same time begin to reestablish and resecure the relationship in a healthier way as well, right? But
Yeah.
again, I just said in a few sentences what takes a number of sessions to do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. I mean, I I appreciate the recognition that it is a very vulnerable and tender work to do this. And so if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, oh, like the idea of talking about that or addressing some of those things just feels so difficult, we understand that's totally normal. And at the same time, I think what we're saying is in order if there is any promise or hope of doing something different and not repeating those same cycles, then we have to get through that discomfort. Um, but what I hear both of you saying is there's a way to do that in which, um, yeah, you can. That's sensitive and gracious, while at the same time courageous and honest. Yeah, um, yeah. So maybe let's identify what are some of those patterns, especially ones that are worth naming. What are some of those patterns that end up getting repeated from generation to generation? um, that you would like the listeners or those who are tuning in to be aware of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, the traditional way in which I think a lot of therapists look at this is from an attachment lens, and I would say from a conflict lens. That's probably my area of main focus as a therapist. Attachment would be mostly how we learn how to attach in relationships, how we secure relationships, or if we feel insecure in our relationships, how we go about dealing with those insecurities. I think that's an imprint that happens a lot of times in family of origin that gets replicated. Um, and so it's not explicit, but it's more caught. Like I think, we just think about okay, well, if mom handled her relationship with dad this way,
Right.
or handled her relationship with her siblings this way, or dad vice versa, that teaches me as a kid, okay, that's how we handle uncertainty in relationships, how we handle insecurity or fear or anger, right? That's the imprint. So yeah, again, some of this is it's a lot of nurture stuff, things we see environmentally.
Yeah.
My biggest emphasis when I work with people is just understanding how how we learn conflict styles from our family of origin.
Mhm.
Um, because in my experience, conflict is oftentimes a determinant of how healthy our relationships are. And so if I observe, and this is true, my father being highly passive and conflict avoidant, and whereas my mom is very volatile and very aggressive in conflict, those are both patterns I know well. And I have that gear within me to do either one, because it makes sense. I'm familiar with it. It is intuitive. And so those are things that are most naturally caught by me to be able to replicate when I feel like my back is against the wall. I'm either going to try and shut down and run away or get very aggressive, right? And so I've got to be very aware that that's my conflict style because of my family of origin experience. Girl, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. That's good. As you were sharing about the conflict style, what came to mind was shame, shame patterns within the conflict styles as well, that causes us to not even attempt to um, do any form of conflict with one another. And shame tells people that they're not enough, whether in explicit or implicit ways. And I think most of it is implicit in families. So shame patterns, you just hold on to them deeply, and you play them over and over again. So we see a lot of that in therapy. Um, and that's easily to get transferred to the next generation if it's unresolved. And a lot of shame patterns are unresolved because we don't know we're doing it because it feels like it's a part of how we process our lives, our information. So we don't even know to how to combat it. We don't even know if it's there half the time, right? Unless we are in either conflict or we're in counseling and someone gets to hear how we talk about ourselves, or if we're in leadership somehow and people get to really see how we lead others, right, and how we talk to others, because it comes out somehow. It's just not very conscious all the time. So shift
Mm,
patterns are huge in the therapeutic space.
mm,
Yeah, if I can add on to that real quick, just in terms of like how it gets exposed, because I think a lot of people absolutely agree, aren't even aware of it
Yeah.
because they learn as we go into adulthood how to deal with it and to operate fairly unnoticed to others and to ourselves. But when you get into a marriage or you get into relationships, when someone gets close enough to you, either in these situations or you said, as you said, Joel, in the leadership, these patterns get exposed.
They
You'll
do.
begin to start seeing I react certain ways to feelings of failure, to shame,
Mhm.
or blame in certain ways that like you can't quite regulate or control. And that's like hardwired coding from family of origin stuff,
Mhm.
right? And so that's usually when I'll see people will say, there's something going on that they're like, what's going on with that? And they're using some type of motivation because they have a relationship on the line.
Yep.
yeah. So would it be like, let's say someone grows up from their parents hearing or feeling like I'm not good enough, like nothing I do is good enough, and that's the shame. That's the experience of shame.
Well, I don't even know if it's like that conscientious, but it is actually what happens because they see, let's say, that I'll just say for my family, for example, if my mother feels attacked or like she is, held to account, she doesn't realize she's feeling shame. What comes out is anger. What comes out is a lot of defensiveness. I don't even think she's aware that she's feeling feelings of shame. But what we catch on the other end is that, oh, that's how you handle it. If you feel something, this is how you respond. And so it's not even like a obvious thing. It's just that what you see and what you catch is essentially the coping mechanism, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so then even if a person isn't able to articulate like, oh, I had this experience of not feeling enough, but that's what I've viscerally experienced. And then now I'm interacting with other people and they make a mistake or they do something that triggers that memory, the way I respond to them, the way I scold them or berate them or diss them or distance myself, like all that communicates to them like you're not good enough either, right? Like you better try really hard or be perfect, otherwise, you're playing into this feeling, and then that gets perpetuated,
Yeah,
right?
that's how it
So it's
Yeah.
spreads. That's how
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
how that's how it works. Yep.
Yep.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
how it is.
I I'm aware of also, like you guys mentioned, so attunement, how we attach to people. If
Yeah.
that's new language for some of you, there's so much out there that's really worth looking at, because that that cuts across every relationship that we have, how we connect. You all mentioned the shame patterns. What about the whole notion of, you hear this a lot, right? Like those who had experienced trauma or abuse in their lives often end up perpetuating that same thing. And then that is, I think, the sinful cycle, the vicious cycle of
Hmm.
trauma or sin that gets perpetuated. Um, why does that happen? Why does it get perpetuated like that when we see, oh, that's terrible. Like, I don't want to do that. And yet that becomes the very thing we do.
Well, I think it's not as conscious. We may feel it. We may feel the shame, and we may feel the patterns. We may be a part of those patterns, and we may push back on those patterns, but we don't realize that we're internalizing those patterns, right? We're 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 like studying those patterns, and we're taking them in. Ourselves, our being is taking them in. They become second nature because is there another example in front of us to do it differently? Because think
Mm,
about it this way, right? You're in your home for however many years, 18, 20, 21 years. You're in the family forever. You've been studying this family since you were a baby. You've been taking in all of these instructions, applied instructions most times, and so that's all you know. You have not been a part of a healthy family that does it differently. If for most people, they might go on a sleepover, maybe once or twice, and they might see a different family do it differently, or they might watch a sitcom and, the Cosby Show doing it differently. That's 30 minutes a week, but
right.
you're in your family forever. And you've been learning those patterns forever. And even if you push back, you felt the pain of those patterns when you were growing up. That's all you know.
Yeah.
There's never been another example for you to do it differently. That's all you know.
Yeah, I will echo and add on to that. When you asked the question, John, my first thought was, what we're basically talking about is how people deal with pain.
Yeah.
Um, and trauma is when there's pain that's been inflicted, for whatever reason. And we, to Drilla's point, see how other people handle their pain by inflicting pain upon us, for example. Right? That's part of the way this works. Because the thing I see most often is that when people are out of their own wounds and out of their own pain, inflicting trauma on other people, that's how a lot of times it gets caught. Like when a father who out of his own trauma deals with his pain by handling his son or his daughter a certain way, and that's what the child sees, is that, okay, that's how we deal with pain. Like that may be how I see my dad. I see him as being big and aggressive. That's how I will respond, or that's how I expect people to respond to me. And so it's not a conscientious thing. I don't think anyone's calculated there and thinking, okay, this is what this is what I learned, this is what I'll do. But I agree with Drilla's point. Like, if that's all you've ever known, if this all you've ever seen is this is how people handle their discomfort, how they handle stress, how they handle, again, at the underneath of it all, pain, then that's what they'll do. There's no other example in which they're going to do. And even then, when you do learn a different way, you're still working against a lot of muscle memory, right? Your
Exactly.
Right.
body, your mind, your neural pathways are wired to handle it a certain way, and it takes a lot of effort to overcome that muscle.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
we understand why it happens, but a lot of times it just simply comes down to doing a lot of work
Yeah.
to undo those wirings and then to relearn new ways.
Yeah. And that's one of the examples I can give to that is in situations of DV, domestic violence, for example. The children who are watching violence in the home, it usually gets repeated, even though they saw how painful and harmful it was to the people, to the adults in the family and themselves. Many times they'll repeat it. Many times they'll find themselves in relationships that repeat those same patterns.
Wow. Yeah. It's really that's very striking, isn't it? The
Isn't
way humans are formed and the way God has designed us with these connections, and how, I mean, it speaks to the impact and influence our parents are meant to have on us. And yet, because of our own brokenness and struggles and woundings from those that came before us, yeah, like it gets passed on. And yeah, so I'm sitting with that reality. I've always been a little troubled by like Exodus chapter 34, where the Bible talks about like how God will visit the sin of generations to the third and fourth generation. So I wanted to touch upon that because I think it is really important for us to look at. Exodus 34:7, for example, says that God maintains love to 1,000 generations, or to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. And so this is a text to wrestle with, but when I think about it from the lens of what we're discussing, from the lens of mental health, and even as I look at it afresh, two things I just wanted to briefly comment on is first that the accent in this passage is to contrast God's love to thousands, right? Or 1,000 generations, in contrast to the punishment to third and fourth generation, 3 and 4 versus thousands. And so I think that's a helpful thing to keep in mind, that the accent and purpose of this passage is to highlight, oh, wow, there's this bountiful love that God has for his people. But the second thing is, I think one way to understand the punishment that gets visited upon the third and fourth generation is from this lens of generational trauma, that those patterns get passed down from one generation to the next. And that's the way in which the consequences of, I mean, you mentioned domestic violence or whatever the struggle might be, ends up getting transmitted. And yet, there's hope. There is, I mean, I truly believe the gospel always says that death, curse, vicious cycles are not the final word. There is always an opportunity to create something new. And so I want us to talk about hope. Like, what does it look like to have hope when it comes to these cycles of trauma? How does that intersect with what we're discussing?
Yeah, let me take a crack at this one first, because yeah, there's a lot there that I want to maybe touch upon or unpack. So first, let me answer your first question in terms of hope. I feel like I have to apply this at great length for myself, because let me say it this way: I am observant of the impact that my parents have had on me, and again, as I mentioned in the beginning part of our segment, try to hold that with compassion. But for backstory, my parents came during the Vietnam War, and they had their own trauma, a number of different things that were going on, their parents and so forth, generational stuff. Right? And so I can understand, even though I have been a recipient of a lot of the negativity that came from that, I'm also very compassionate as to understanding why, right? And again, as I said, I can hold both of those at the same time. And to take what you had said earlier, I can see some of our listeners kind of feel like, oh man, like what I'm doing now has this repercussion down the line for 3 and 4 generations, and that can feel a little bit terrifying, and sometimes a little bit hopeless too, right? That like, well, then this is the way the Lord will handle us in generations to come. I feel like there's so much redemption and so much healing in this space when we allow ourselves to open that part up to, a connected space in therapy and inviting the Lord into those spaces to have those kind of conversations. I feel like there is so much that needs to be talked out and healed and touched upon. And in doing so, um, I believe this is how we begin to stave off the impacts of that generational sin, right? Um, I will say this as well. This is something I feel like I have to receive myself as a parent too, because I start to think about the things I'm doing to my kids and how it's impacting them. And I have to treat myself with a lot of compassion and grace as well. That the things that I do that maybe coming from my own history, my own upbringing, like the things that which I am, I've been a recipient of from my parents, are they may impact my kids, but also knowing that the Lord heals those things. That they're like
Yeah.
to Drilla's point at the very beginning. There's no perfect parent out here, right? None of us are doing it right, right? And kind of as a therapist, I'll say this little inside pro tip on how that works for therapists. We are aware. That's the hard part. We are aware of how imperfect we are, right?
Yep. Yep.
And there's nothing that's stopping that. We're still doing it anyways. I tell myself all the time, my kids are going to need their own therapy. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there some way in which I know that I'm harming them? And there's a lot of grace. There's a lot of compassion that goes with that too. And that's the only way that works is if you can issue compassion and grace, not just to others, but to yourself as well. Okay. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful. I love the word awareness because I think that's key to be able to see. What's problematic is when we continue to perpetuate those patterns and not see. So the hope comes in the seeing. The hope comes in the being aware and knowing that something's not right here. And these patterns are not life-giving. This is not the abundant life that Christ talked about, right? And so to be aware is huge. Now, being aware doesn't necessarily mean it solves the problem, like Lee just said. Being aware means the grace part of it. Like I'm aware of some of the things, for example, my family came from Haiti, and I thought they thought I was fine because they moved us from Haiti, and we were fine and everything was good, and we have a home now and we're eating well and we're doing going to school, and they thought we were fine, but I wasn't fine. Now, fast forward to my children, I really think they were fine. I'm here thinking they were okay. They're just I'm a therapist, I'm a pastor, I've done all these things. I know everything there is to know about, well, I know a lot, right? And so I'm sitting here thinking my children will be the most nurtured, connected, healthy, emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy kid. But no, they're like, Mom, well, actually, we experienced trauma. Trauma? What do you mean trauma? And so, but I'm aware. I'm aware, yet and still, there were some things that got transferred onto them where they felt something. They felt the shame. They felt the pressure. They felt the tension that my mother felt, that I felt, and now they're feeling. Now, the hope for us is that we're able to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm able to talk to my kids about it. They're able to say, I feel pain. I feel trauma. I feel, the silence. I feel, shame. I can't do that with my mom, because my mom couldn't receive it in the way I can receive it from my children telling me. So that's part of breaking it, even though they're experiencing it. Now they can look back into the next generation, into the previous generation, and talk back to me. I can't talk back to the previous generation.
And that's that whole element of opening up the conversation, having that conversation, because the awareness allows that conversation. Like, hey, Lee, thank you for being with us. Unfortunately, Lee has to jump off, but Dieula and I are going to continue this conversation.
Yes.
We will try to channel our inner Lee. Thanks, Lee.
Just start sneezing uncontrollably.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, guys.
I'll
All
try.
right. See ya.
All right, bye.
So yeah, I was thinking about those conversations.
Yeah.
And yeah, awareness allows those conversations to even take place, to have those meta level, like, hey, what's going on here? And so Grace and I, one of the things that we really, I think, has brought us together is having those conversations about what are the new patterns? What
Yeah.
are the new opportunities? And by opportunity, we're not talking about academic or career opportunities. We're talking about new pathways of connecting and being in the world that we want to offer our children that we didn't get or that we didn't experience.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think that fills both of us with a lot of hope and vision of what's this new thing that God is doing in the next generation that we can change. Maybe it's a couple degrees or maybe even vastly the trajectory of their formation, their experience of relationship and life. I know for myself,
Yeah.
one of those arenas is like just very concretely how I approach repair. And so, in recent years, I've really tried to come back to situations where like I know I messed up with my kids or the way I taught, or even with Grace. Like I didn't show up the way I blew up or I overreacted, and being willing to own that mistake and failure there and say, that's not the way I want to show up. I know this impacted you in
Yeah.
this way, XYZ.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And that is not a conversation I had with my own dad growing up.
Yeah.
And knowing that, okay, if I can model that for them, they can feel what that feels like, what a repair feels like, then hopefully they'll be able to carry that on
Yeah.
with the people they interact with, not just their children, but coworkers and friends and colleagues.
Yeah.
And right now I'm aware of thinking like, okay, like, hey dad, if you're listening to this right now and I'm wrong, like you remember times when that happened, like I'm willing to stand corrected. But
That's
yeah,
right.
that's what I remember, Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I think, as a parent doing this work of breaking generational trauma, it's really hard, just being on the other side of it because my children are 27 and 25 twins. Navigating that space is so difficult because on the one hand, there needs to be some, rules, some boundaries to govern the family, while at the same time, grace to be able to say, I'm sorry, to be able to do the repair work. And sometimes it's so hard to do the rules and the boundaries in fear of continuing and perpetuating generational trauma, right? That part is so hard, is so difficult, as a parent being the one trying to break the cycle.
Can you give an
Will-
example of that, Dieula? I mean, I understand it in concept, but I'm like trying to figure out what is
Yeah.
that?
For example, having you know, rules of saying no, your bedtime is 10 o'clock. And then your children are like, "Oh, you're inflicting trauma on me because you want me to sleep at I'm just being this is an
Yeah, yeah,
exaggerated example.
yeah.
Inflicting trauma on me because, you're giving me a bedtime when my friends don't have a bedtime, blah, 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 blah." And in your family, there needs to be some boundaries. There need to be some rules. And in your hearts of hearts, you're over here feeling bad because you committed to breaking generational trauma.
Okay, so you lived in a household where there were lots of rules just imposed. And
Right.
now anything that smells like that is like, oh,
Exactly.
okay, I see what you're saying.
Exactly. And so that part is quite challenging for being the parent trying to be the cycle breaker. Both wanting to create some boundaries, some rules within the home, some structure within the home, while at the same time having grace having some flexibility in the space and all of that. It's really difficult. So my thing is, you won't do it right perfectly. You won't always do it right. You won't always get it right. What you said sticks with me is the repair work. When you don't do it well, to apologize. And when you need to be firm, to be firm. And if they're hurt, it's okay. There's therapy
Yeah.
for that. You know? So
Yeah.
it's being able to manage the both and.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I really want to impress and that we're trying to impress here is that all of us have a past. And some of that past is really, really difficult to face, really painful. And we cannot change the past. We cannot change the past. But we do have power to change our relationship to the past. We could begin to see that past with greater understanding, awareness, honesty, and compassion. And if you can start to do that work, then it empowers you to change your future, and to break those cycles of generational trauma. As we begin to wrap up, Dieula, I wonder if for those who want to do that, who maybe feel a little seed of hope, like, okay, like maybe I can change the patterns. What advice or perspective, are there practical tools or next steps that people can lay a hold of to begin this process and this journey?
Yeah, I think the one we talked about is huge, and that one takes a lot of time. Create awareness and sit with it. Create awareness and be gracious to self, because what many want to do right away is to change the patterns, change everything. And it doesn't work that way, right? It's really creating awareness, writing, journaling, sitting with it, praying, talking to friends, talking to people, talking to your therapist to process what you're sensing, feelings, or wondering about, right? Because that process in and of itself, that's like 75% of the counseling work
Mm.
is sitting with those feelings, interrogating those thoughts or that pattern, that past pattern, um,
Grieving it, I think, right? Lamenting
grieving
and
it.
grieving it. Yeah.
Yes, grieving and lamenting them.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to hold the both and the honor and honest, having honest conversations. So I would say, go slowly. Take your time, be gracious to yourself. Be kind to yourself as you're going through that pattern. And when you fail, because you will, because you're breaking something, and that means there will be relapse into your old self, to forgive yourself and start over again. So it takes time. It takes time to do that work. So be kind and patient with yourself.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for saying that. That's a really good word, because so many of us, we want to just get through it, get to the solution, fix it, do something different. But I think what I hear you saying is, unless we allow it to sit with us, sit with it for a while, any corrective action will just be a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It'll just be like, well, I'm just going to react and try my best, try my darndest to do it differently. But we haven't actually healed those past wounds, so that we can truly create something, generate something that's new and different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I hope our listeners will take that to heart, to be patient with yourself and kind with yourself as you do this very courageous and hard work, but necessary work.
Very
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Dieula. I think we are about out of time here.
Yes.
So this is a lot of really good stuff to wrestle with, for us all to wrestle with. We're all continuing to wrestle with this. And so our prayer, as always, and hope for all of you, is that may God bless you and strengthen you as you do the work. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to The Work Within. We hope this show blessed you in some way. Please subscribe and leave us a review. Your support means a lot to us. Finally, if you're looking for a therapist, we'd love to help. Visit us at www.watershedinitiative.com to get started. For a limited time, new clients can receive 10% off their first 5 sessions of therapy by mentioning The Work Within. Join us again next time.